Hello and welcome. I'm James Milan. Arlington is one of 16 towns that for a number of decades now have made up the district for the Minuteman Vocational Technical High School. Arlington has also for much of that time supplied the largest share of in-district students to Minuteman. On Tuesday, September 20th, residents from all 16 towns will vote yes or no on a proposed rebuild, complete rebuild of the Minuteman High School. We have invited two very knowledgeable Arlingtonians into the studio today to take a hard look at the issues in preparation for the vote. Dean Carman supports the idea of the rebuild, and he is a long-term Finance Committee member, now 10 years or more on the committee, and also a town meeting member. And Barbara Thornton, who is a Capital Planning Committee member and town meeting member as well, has also been a resident of the town for 30 years, raised your family here, as I understand it, and both of these guys are numbers crunchers and really have their fingers on the pulse of what's happening in Arlington. I should mention also that Barbara opposes the Minuteman project, at least as it is currently configured. So thank you both for coming in to talk us through the issues. I wanted to begin by inviting each of you to just, and we'll start with you, Dean, to go ahead and state your position and why, and more or less just describe your general perspective on the issue here.
Right now we are I'm hoping, at the tail end of a 6-year process on the rebuild of Minuteman Vocational. Back in 2010, the district endeavored to rebuild a new school. They went out to the member communities, they solicited feedback, they got input. They had identified the hurdles to building a new school. The biggest hurdles at the time were enrollment, which had been declining, and a school that was too big. The current Minuteman, I think it fits about 1,200 students, so there's a lot of pushback on building a school that would, be that big, in the governance structure where regardless of the number of students you sent, each community got one vote. Over the last 6 years, the district's worked very hard to work through those challenges. The new school is targeted at 628 students, where historic enrollment over the last decade has been about 725 students. They changed the governance structure to get away from the one town, one vote, so we now have weighted voting, which is very advantageous to Arlington, which sends almost a third of the member students. And they worked through some of the smaller challenges, which included along the way the towns that sent one or two students mostly that didn't want to be in the district anymore. And so, over the last 6 years, they've worked through the challenges. They work with the school building authority, and so where I'm hoping we are right now is on that final hurdle of approval from the district so we can start building a new school and move forward.
Barbara, you oppose this, and why is that?
I am very much in favor of vocational technical education for our students, and specifically for our students in Arlington. But I think this proposal is the wrong proposal at the wrong time. I would prefer to postpone it, and the reason for that, there are a few reasons for that. One, fiscally, this comes at a time when Arlington is known as being a very fiscally responsible town. We let people know in advance when there's likely to be the need for an override. People see it coming, they see it, and they always have in the past approved our overrides. If we do this now, just when the Arlington High School has been waiting for a decade for its renovation, it's going to come at the same time. We're going to need an override. It's going to be a big override. It's going to affect the future of what we can program for space for Arlington High School, and it's going to really increase the tax rates in the town. I think that that's going to break trust with the town folk for the future, and I think that's unfortunate. We have a sort of a perfect storm of problems right now. Dean is absolutely right. We have worked hard to get a new regulatory system for the regional agreements so that we have more authority in Arlington, because we do have so many kids invested in that school. But we're going to have far fewer members. It's not the district membership is not cut in half, but it's close to that. We don't know what that's going to mean. We don't know what the distribution of costs is going to be. We're going to have a new school built for maybe $155 million, And if Arlington ends up having over 50% of the kids in that school, we're going to have to pay for that. That's a huge amount of money. We don't know how it's going to be distributed to out-of-district kids. We don't know if there are going to be any out-of-district kids. Given what the status is for this program and how it's being defined, we don't know if we can spread those capital costs across the out-of-district population. And a huge portion, far more than average. The average number of kids from out-of-district in a VocTech program is typically 6%. In Arlington, it's more like 40%.
In the Minuteman district.
In the Minuteman district, it's more like 40%. So we have a huge unknown there. Are we going to have any kids from out of district to pay any tuition? And is that tuition going to include the costs of this new construction, or are they going to be exempt from it? We don't know. There are several other things that we don't know, given the future, what the programming needs are going to be. Right now, Minuteman purports to support kids that want to go into hairdressing and kids that want to go into robotics. That's a very wide divergence of different kinds of skills for a relatively small school. Minuteman in the future will be 625 kids. Minuteman, if it's able to enroll that much, and by the way, the enrollment has continued to go down every year, between 13 and 18%. So it's really tough to imagine that they are going to be able to manage good training for kids that have such a wide diversity of experiences. I think it's a perfect storm. We need to wait. We need to resolve some of these issues. We need to see what the lay of the land is, and then make a decision to support Minuteman in whatever makes sense in a couple of years.
I wanted, before we go any further, just to make sure that we are in general agreement about certain numbers, and also just to lay out a small part of the timeline that you both referred to of the work that's happened, or the things that have happened over the last 6 years. And that is because we're not going to spend our time talking about how we got here. Instead, we're going to be spending our time talking about whether it's a good idea or not to vote yes or no on Tuesday. So as we know, and as Dean mentioned, this has been at least a 6-year-long process since the introduction of the idea. And most recently, in this past spring, several things happened. Arlington's Finance Committee voted in support of the rebuild, or in support of Arlington taking on its share of the debt for a rebuild, but that was a very close vote, 10-8. That was followed by a more resounding town meeting vote of 165 in support to 31 opposed. And then, in turn, Arlington voters themselves, on ballot question number 3, some months back in June, voted 64% in favor of the Minuteman project. At the same time, or around the same time, as we know, all 16 towns in the district would have needed to vote in favor of the project for it to go forward under the configuration at that time of one vote and the required unanimity among all the towns for any proposal of this size. Belmont's town meeting, as we are aware, was the one town, or Belmont was the one town through their town meeting who resoundingly voted against that, which is what brings us to the current situation where a single vote from all 16 towns, undifferentiated by town, but rather the aggregate will happen on Tuesday, and a simple majority will determine whether to move forward with this project or not. So now the numbers. You had mentioned 155 million. I'm going to say that the estimated cost of the rebuild I have seen is around 145. Anyway, it's in that ballpark, as we know. And that rebuild would be supplemented by the MSBA, the state board, that would supply about 40 $46 million in aid of the project. And estimates, again, that I've heard for Arlington's share of the debt come in generally around 32 to 34 million from people's best guesses. Basically, let's start with the cost per student given the declining enrollment at Minuteman. As I think you cited, or you may have, a much larger proportion of Minuteman students have come from out of district than is the case for other regional technical schools. Around 40% or more over these last number of years. How do you see that affecting or being affected by this project moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. And I think as we were talking about the 6-year process that we went through, it was one thing that we had spoken a lot about with the state, with the district, at the finance committee, at the selectmen, in various levels. And when we started the process, we were very concerned that non-member towns, we had no vehicle or no mechanism to charge them a capital assessment. And we said that to the state. Why would we build a building where the member towns have to pay all of the capital and the non-members can't pay any of the capital? The good news is in 2015, the state changed the law, or the DESE changed the rules, which allows us to charge each non-member town a non-member per pupil assessment. I think it's about $8,000 per pupil for their share of the building. And so then the next question people always ask, and you hear a lot, is you say, okay, well, if you start charging this assessment and you make the school more expensive, aren't the non-member towns going to leave? And my response back to that is, where are they going to go? And so, I know people talk a lot about the large non-member percentage in the Minuteman district, but some of those schools that are non-member, this is their sole vocational school. So I use Watertown as an example. They don't have another vocational option. Cambridge Rangers and Latin isn't going to accept the students. Newton's not going to accept the students. They have nowhere else to go. They're geographically positioned in a place where they're going to have to send their kids to Minuteman, helping us on the back end of that, because people say, well, maybe they could just bring the programs in-house. Well, they can't do that either, because the state was very clear to Minuteman when we went to build the building that they would not fund a vocational school for less than 600 kids, because they felt the economies of scale had such negative leverage that it wasn't worth the investment. And so so I agree that the non-member student is a concern. It was a significant concern in 2010. I don't feel it's as much of a concern anymore, just because we do have the leverage to charge them a capital assessment. And like I said, a lot of the towns that are non-members don't have other options. Even Belmont has talked about withdrawing. I don't think they'd get the votes, but even if they did, Belmont has nowhere else to go. Watertown has nowhere else to go. Waltham does some of their programming internally. They do some of their programming externally. But again, if you follow that 600 student rule, they couldn't bring that program internally. Medford can't bring the programming internally. Everett can't bring the programming internally. And so I think moving forward, as we move from a 700 student school to a 625 student school, we'll be okay. At the same time, and this will be the last point, is one of the advantages I think we will have moving forward, and it will take a few years to really feel it, is a lot of these member towns are experiencing what Arlington is with this massive exploding enrollment at the elementary school level. We've seen it time and time again in Arlington, Winchester, Belmont, Lexington, Watertown, where the enrollment's just rapidly going. And so you'd expect, starting in 4 or 5 years, that our member population, even if we just set the same percentage of kids, our kids will have to go up. Lexington kids will have to go up, because if you're sending 10% of your kids to a vocational school, 10% of a bigger number is a bigger number. So I understand it's a big issue. I understand it's an issue of concern, but I do feel with the work we did over the last 6 years that we overcame that hurdle.
So given the fact that there are limited or no options for non-member towns, and the fact that we will be able to assess, or Minuteman will be able to assess a fee to non-member students to cover the capital costs, and as you say, the general growth of enrollment. Is Dean right? Do we not have that much to worry about then?
Love Dean as I do. No, he's not. There is no clear agreement it is not settled yet that DESE is going to allow us to bill that estimated $8,600 per student capital cost onto these out-of-district people who now represent 40% of the district. If we were able to do that, it would be $2,900 plus $8,600 billed to those cities for those kids, Watertown, let's take for example, is going to look at that bill and say, wait a minute, I could get an Uber to send my kids to Shawsheen, which is $1,600 or $16,000 a year or $13,000 a year, I forget which. So there are lots of other options. And when we're talking about the concept of a program, let's break down what we mean by program, because we have so many kids, and these kids need to be thought of as individual kids, not just a program of VocaTech kids that get funneled into an address someplace. These kids, some of them want to be hairdressers, some of them want to be plumbers, some of them want to be electricians, some of them want to be civil engineers, some of them want to go into robotics. There's a wide range of kids, and in the greater Boston area, we have such a wealth of opportunities. We can take those kids and we can say, some of you are going to go into a program at a community college that is specifically tailored. Some of you are going to go work with a union to be trained for what you want to do. Some of you are going to go into other fields. There are lots and lots of opportunities that are creatively emerging literally daily. I woke up this morning, I read the Boston Globe, and Somerville has got $10 million for their new high school program to develop what is in effect a maker space, very comparable to what a robotics type tech program would be in a VocaTech school traditionally. We need to think more creatively about the options. And right now, we have on the table the beginning of an opportunity to design the renovations for a new Arlington high school. Put up a space like Somerville is, make it a maker space, bring in tech people from MIT, bring in tech people from Wentworth, bring in unions, bring in whatever it takes, and give these kids a hand-on experience in Arlington. We need to think about these as individual kids and not a big VocaTech program. And there are lots of options. We are blessed with options. And we should look at them before we make this decision about this vote.
Okay. It does sound like you can imagine a universe for Arlington students that doesn't include Minuteman as an option.
Yes, but I'm not saying no to Minuteman. I just want us to know that we are programming in Minuteman for what could conceivably be 50% of Minuteman's population or more. 66% of Minuteman's population could be Arlington kids. So Minuteman would really be an Arlington school. The responsibility for paying for that would really be an Arlington taxpayer responsibility. Okay. So we need to answer these other programmatic questions, and we need to not have it collide with the plan for Arlington High School. I'm just saying we need to defer this for 2 or 3, 5 years, and they will come back and they will get funding, but we need to know what we're designing for.
Okay, well, one of the consequences I can imagine of deferring for 2 to 5 years involves the fact that the facility at Minuteman is now 40 years old. Relatively recently, the New England Association of Schools and Colleges, which is what accredits high schools and colleges in the New England area, in its accreditation process, specifically cited and warned Minuteman that because of its physical plant, it was threatened with not receiving accreditation in the future. So that's the next topic to be discussed here. Dean.
It's a big issue. Arlington High and Minuteman both have accreditation warnings. I think the nice folks at Build Arlington's Future on their website have a link to both the accreditation warnings. I read Arlington's and it makes me very nervous. I read Minuteman's and I'm terrified. I mean, they were much harder on Minuteman in saying this is a big problem and you have to do something about it. You simply can't allow this 40-year-old facility, which you've sort of worked with patchwork and Band-Aids, to continue like this. And so, doing nothing really isn't an option. I mean, we either have to, we have to come up with a solution relatively soon, because I think the accreditations are every decade, and I think that warning they got was a few years ago. So we have to move through the process. And so at this point, the real challenge is, knowing we have to do something. Do we want to go it alone, or do we, and not go with state funding and not get a $44 million match from the state, or do we want to partner with the state? And that's the big question that we're always going to keep coming back to. And what I always look at, and it just, because people, when we'll talk a lot about enrollment and projections and things like that, what I always lean on, and this project went through the MSBA feasibility study process from beginning to end. And the MSBA looks at enrollment, and their job in a lot of ways is really to stop these out of control spending projects like the Newton Norths that occurred, last decades and things like that, and streamline things. And as a community in Arlington, we have to draw a line and say, do we believe the MSBA or do we not? We can't cherry pick it. So we can't say that we went through an MSBA process at Thompson and we believed it was credible. It ended up being under too small, but we went through the process. We're going through the process at Arlington High, and we partner and believe in the MSBA. But Minuteman, we don't trust them. We can't say that we can't pick and choose when we trust the same people. We trust them or we don't. And the town has been very clear that we believe historically that the process with the MSBA has been robust, thorough, strong, and has worked for the good of the community. Do we get everything that we want? No, we don't. We have to compromise, we have to give and take, and especially in a regional vocational school. There's a lot of compromise, between the member towns, so everybody keeps going forward. But to me, this is, like you said, with the accreditation warning, with the threat, doing nothing's out of the question. And to me, this path forward it is the most prudent. It has been looked at, it has been vetted, it has been thoroughly analyzed. There have been some people that have talked about rebuilding it over the course of 10 years in a process that hasn't been vetted. It's a non-MSBA vetted process. And so if we're going to talk about credibility, to me, that process doesn't have any credibility. It's a group that's decided that would be a better alternative based on metrics the state never looked at. So, I agree, there is urgency on it, and the path we have is probably the best one we can go with.
Oh, Dean, I will take you for coffee. Honest, I completely disagree. First of all, there are lots of questions about the cost for renovating versus rebuilding Minuteman. There's one of my colleagues on the Capital Planning Committee sat on the Minuteman Advisory Committee for a long time looking at this, and he feels very strongly that the renovation costs are not correct. The renovation costs that were done by the only study that I know of that was done for renovation was by a company called Daedalus. And by the way, this information is, I think, on yesyesno.org website and various other places. But the estimate was for renovation costs for Minuteman would be $38 million. Somehow, in the flow of information, there has been kind of a consensus agreement that the renovation costs would be $100 million and new construction would be $100 million after the MSB reimbursement, and that's just not valid. First of all, there are renovation costs. MSBA has a renovation program that has not been looked at by Minuteman. There are opportunities for pulling in more money.
So, excuse me, I just want to clarify. So you're saying that there is an MSBA, there is an option for the MSBA also contributing to a program of renovation as opposed to rebuild?
Or ACB, I forget what it is. But yes, that is, and that's not been investigated. So again, it's just, there are things that haven't been looked at that we need to look at before we commit Arlington to this huge bundle of money. I agree, both schools are looking at decertification. Arlington High School has been looking at decertification for a long time because of the inadequacies of their science labs. This is the 21st century. We need to get with the program. We need to get with it urgently, and we need to do it right. I don't want to compromise the quality of Arlington High School students for 95% of the kids moving through Arlington, because we are tied ourselves down to a program that we also have to finance something else. The Capital Planning Committee is going to have to make those decisions. We have to narrow the range of what we spend on Arlington High in order to afford to live within our taxpayers' ability to pay what we're going to get from what we're going to be responsible for rebuilding versus renovating the Minuteman.
Mm-hmm. There is a clear historical pattern over the last number of years of declining enrollment within the member within the member school, the member towns, excuse me. As I think we also mentioned, the new district will be 10 towns as opposed to the 16 because 6 opted out when they had the opportunity over the last months. Dean, isn't that a problem going forward?
Well, no, because if you look at the enrollment over the last decade, it has volleyed from, I think, probably a high of 750 kids to a low of 700 kids. It hasn't been in free fall. When we talk about declining enrollment, we're not talking 750, 725, 700.
Right, but how about on the in-district side?
Well, let me start with the overall.
Okay,
so in the overall, we've been at 700 plus students for the duration. The school's at 625. So to get to the actual capacity of the school, you have to drop out 75 students. The district enrollment, again, I mean, I think before the current administration got there, had some significant volatility in terms of, I think there was a time there were 500 students and it declined down to about 400, but it's remained somewhat consistent at 400. I mean, it goes up a little, it goes down a little. The 6 towns, 7 towns, I forget how many that are leaving, do not send a majority of the kids. So probably at worst case, we'll drop the in-district enrollment down to 330, 340. Some of those kids are going to go to other vocational schools. Some of them will come back as non-member towns and get, charged a capital assessment, and we'll go from there. So I don't see overall enrollment as a large concern, especially when, like I said, I mean, the state has said that we can charge a capital fee. It hasn't been done before, but they have said that we can do it. And I just don't believe that the state is going to put $44 million into a building and then change course on that. And then suddenly have a school that's vacant and in trouble. I mean, once they put $44 million into this, they're just as invested as we are to continue forward with the district.
Oh, I don't want to bet on the state being willing to support Arlington's position on this. There's a very good likelihood that these out-of-district towns, if they're interested in Minuteman, are going to go to court for the lower fee, which means that they would be paying $15,000 to $20,000 per head, and we'd be paying $45,000 per head for these kids. That's a big difference that I don't want to take. And I also don't think we're ever going to reach again the capacity. That capacity now, the seats in the school are based on 40% out-of-district kids. If those out-of-district people decide they don't want to pay this additional charge, remember that Minuteman is the Cadillac of schools because it's by far the most expensive at $29,000 a head versus like $13,000 state average. So if they decide they're going to go elsewhere with their money and take an Uber to Shawsheen, we're going to be left with a school that is hugely over capacity that we're still going to have to pay for. And our population in Minuteman is declining. I have the numbers here. It was 624 enrollment this year in 2016. It was 673 the year before. The year before that, it was 715. The year before that, it was 852. It has been declining every year steadily. In the 10th grade population, it declined 18% from 11th grade this year. In the 9th grade population, it declined an additional 13%, or maybe it was the reverse, 13 and 18%. Anyway, it's going down. So we're not going to get the out-of-district kids. We're not going to be able to fill the 625 seats with in-district people because almost half the district towns have left. We're going to have a big empty building filled with 50%, 60% Arlington kids paying $45,000, $50,000 a year at the time that we're trying to build a new Arlington high school. Postpone it until we can settle these numbers. There's no guarantee that we will be able to get this money from out-of-district people.
Appreciate very much your guys taking the time today. Obviously, the vote on Tuesday is got a lot of compelling arguments on both sides, well articulated by our 2 guests today, and we appreciate that. We hope this will be helpful for you as you enter the voting booth on Tuesday. We urge you to do so, and we thank you for joining us. I'm James Milan on behalf of Dean Carman and Barbara Thornton. Thanks for joining us.